All right, perfect. Okay, so we're going to continue right where we left off last week. Did you have a chance to do any of the homework?
No.
Okay, no worries, no worries. All right, so last week we talked in general just what etymology was. It's basically the study of true sense and the true sense of the word in this case. And I want to continue talking about that, of course. And so what I want to do is, so we went over this first lesson here, I believe, and then we started on this one here. Ambi and amphi. Do you remember, without looking, of course, what the word, let's see, I want to try to do this so that you can't see. Okay, so do you remember what the word ambiguous means?
It means like unclear, I think.
Yeah, and do you remember where it comes from, the etymology of it? What does ambi mean?
Ambi?
Mm-hmm.
Around.
Around, good. So it literally means to speak around something or to talk around it. Or it could also mean it has two meanings. It means both things. Do you remember what ambidextrous means?
Has a lot of energy.
No? Okay, so what does ambi mean again?
Oh, wait, hold on. It's the ability to use both hands.
There you go.
Okay.
Yeah. Equally, correct, right. And it comes from ambi, which means both, plus dexter, which means right hand. So it means you have both right hands. You can use both hands. What does ambivalent mean? If you're feeling ambivalent, what does that mean?
Feeling...
So, okay, I'll give you a clue. So, ambi means both, and then val comes from the same root as to turn, like vert. So, ambivalent literally means turned both ways. If you feel ambivalent about something, it means you're conflicted. Like, you have a decision to make, and maybe both of them seem like really good options, and so you're feeling ambivalent. You can't decide between things. Okay, and I think those were the main ones. Let's move on to the next lesson here. I'm going to go back to the first one, a or an. Now, we've done some of these before, but I want to do a little bit of review. So a or an both mean not. Now, to make it a little bit more confusing, a or an can also mean friendly, has two different meanings. Like, for example, the word, I'll write them on the board, amicable, amiable, amity. These words all mean have something to do with friendliness or being kind. And so you want to be careful that you're not mixing them up too much. But usually when a word starts with a or an, it just means it negates whatever root comes after it. So for example, if something is asymmetrical, that means it's literally not symmetrical. And if it's atypical, that means it's not typical. Then we have the words atheist and agnostic. So an atheist believes that there is no plus theo, which means God. There's no God. Agnostic just thinks that we don't know whether or not there's a God. And of course, the root nos, G-N-O-S, the funny spelling like that is why we spell the word no, K-N-O-W, because the Greek G became a K in the English language, and so we don't pronounce the K just like they didn't pronounce the G back then. Okay, so a couple other words to review. Agnostic is just someone who doesn't know whether or not there's a God. They're not going to completely dismiss it, but at the same time, they're not going to agree with it either. So they just don't know. A lot of people who are around my age, in their 20s, are agnostics. They say, I'm not going to say that God for sure doesn't exist, but they don't know whether he does or not, so they say that they're agnostic. Someone who's amoral, as you can probably imagine, that means that they are not moral. In general, this actually means that they are neither moral nor immoral, unable to distinguish between right and wrong. Infants are amoral. So, I'll give you a little legal lesson here, I guess. So, in law, there's actually a defense called the amoral defense. And what this basically means is that the person who committed the crime cannot be held accountable of their actions because they don't know the difference between right and wrong. So it's not like they were being evil. They just literally didn't know. And this is different than like the insanity defense or something like that, where they say they can't be held accountable for their actions because they were insane, or for example, the self-defense, something like that. So the amoral defense says when they, drowned that boy in the river, they did not know that they were doing something wrong. Therefore, they shouldn't be held accountable for murder. Now, most of the time, this doesn't fly because even if you have someone whose intelligence is very low, even someone with low intelligence still knows the difference between right and wrong. People who are sociopaths or psychopaths, sometimes they are amoral. They truly don't know the difference between right and wrong. Then there's anarchy. Anarchy comes from an plus arch, which is ruler. Think of like an archbishop or a hierarchy. And so it literally means without a ruler. So if there's a state of anarchy, it's political disorder and confusion. The overthrow of the government resulted in anarchy. Now, can you think of any place in the world that has an anarchy as their form of government? Trick question. I mean, if it has a form of government, it wouldn't be an anarchy, right? But actually, there are places who have tried to have an anarchy, meaning literally trying to not have any form of government or leadership whatsoever, because in an ideal world, that would be awesome. That would be great to not have any form of government, no control. However, what they found is that in general, an anarchy always leads to political disorder and confusion. That's why the word no longer just means without a ruler. It now means political disorder and confusion, because every time they've tried to have a true anarchy where there's just no ruler, it never has gone well. Then we have an anecdote. An anecdote is a little story, usually that goes at the beginning of an essay, or sometimes they put anecdotes in books. They're usually humorous. They're something that's kind of funny, and they're used to make a point usually. Someone who's anemic, you can probably look at the word and tell what it is. It literally means without blood. So someone who's anemic has a deficiency of red blood cells. If you're anemic, that means that you can't donate blood. It usually means that you need more iron in your blood, so eat more spinach. So people who are anemic, they just don't have enough blood, or their blood is, they have a deficient red blood cells. Anesthetic. Have you ever been under anesthetic for surgery or anything?
I think so.
Yeah, if you've had surgery, probably anesthetic, even if it's not full anesthetic. Full anesthetic is when you're completely out, you have no memory of anything going on. A local anesthetic is where they just numb a certain part of your body. Like if you're getting something done with your mouth, they'll usually numb a certain portion of your mouth. But if you get a full anesthetic, you just go to sleep for a long time. And that literally means without feeling. Can you think of any other word that has the aesthet in it for feeling?
Anesthesia?
Yeah, anesthesia would be the noun form. Good. An anomaly is something that is unusual. It literally means not the same as normal. So if something is an anomaly, it does not have any precedent. There's nothing that came before it that is like that. So it's a rare exception, basically. And then we have anonymous. Something that's anonymous is something that you cannot tell who it's from, literally without a name. And then, of course, asymmetrical means not symmetrical in some way. Atheist, we talked about, someone who believes that there is no God. And then atypical means not typical of something. So anomalous and atypical are very familiar. Now, I want to see if you can tell what these words mean just based off of the actual form of the word. So what do you think amorphous means?
I don't know.
So amorphous means literally without shape or without form. So something that's amorphous would be something that just kind of has a static form, and it's like a blob. I guess a blob would be amorphous. Analgesic. So it comes from an and then algesic. This one's a little hard. So this one has to do with, in this case, it's kind of the opposite of anesthesia, or it's actually along the same lines. It basically means without, and then it has to do with your, what I think it comes from, I think this has to do with pain in some way. So it basically means without pain. So it's a drug or something that's intended to relieve pain. Apathetic, you probably know what apathetic means.
No sympathy.
You're close. You're close. So the reason why sympathy is the way it is it comes from the root pathos, which means feeling. So if you're apathetic about something, it means you just don't feel anything toward it. It's not that you're angry. It's not that you're happy. It's just you don't feel anything. And apathy is the noun form. And then the word atom, of course, comes from A plus Tom. Can you guess where the TOM comes from?
No.
It actually means to cut. So an atom is literally something you do not cut. It's the most basic form of matter in the universe, and so it's something that cannot be cut any more than it already is. It's the smallest form that exists, even smaller than a molecule or something. So an atom is not able to be cut. That's where the word originally comes from. Okay, so let's do a little bit of practice with this and see how well you remember. Okay, oops, too big. Okay, so to add interest the professor sprinkled her lectures with what? So what would someone add to a lecture to make it more interesting? So I'll give you a hint. This means a little story or a... Anecdote, an anecdote. So an anecdote is a little story. A lot of times it's told at the beginning of an essay or something, and it's just something that kind of adds interest to something that otherwise would be a little bit boring. So Jolene cried when she saw her blank haircut. One side was 3 inches longer than the other.
Asymmetrical.
Asymmetrical, very good. Good. Okay, so the bidder at the auction wished to remain blank.
Anonymous.
Anonymous, good. There's actually a hacker organization called Anonymous, and they are known for basically bringing justice on people who are bad on the internet, basically. So they've hacked ISIS's Twitter. They have hacked people who sometimes bully other people online, and they do all this crazy stuff in the name of justice. But that's kind of funny that they're called anonymous because, of course, they don't want people to know who they are. So Bryn was late to class, which was blank of her behavior. So it was not the usual, or it was atypical. Good. Good. Blank reigned when the protesters ran wild through the streets, shouting slogans, breaking windows, and overturning cars. Anarchy. Good. After 10 years, Jose quit the ministry and announced he was now a blank because he no longer believed there was a God. Atheist. Good. Sheila is a blank, not knowing whether there is a God. Remember the root for to know?
No.
Agnostic. An agnostic, and then the root nos means to know. That'll be another root we have eventually, so I won't go into too much detail about it now. The mass murderer was blank, so he was judged unaccountable for his actions.
No, not this one.
You know this? Remember the defense that some lawyers can put for their clients? This would be amoral. Amoral. Literally not moral, or not knowing the difference between right and wrong. So the dentist gave the patient blank before pulling all her teeth.
Anesthesia.
Anesthesia, good.
It must be painful.
Yeah. Well, all her teeth sounds a little bit extreme. To fight her blank, the doctor prescribed iron pills.
It's the lack of red blood cells.
Yep. Anemia. Okay, number 11, the socialite is usually so gracious that her leaving without even saying thank you was a blank. Anomaly, good. Good. Okay, matching here really quick. So an agnostic would be what?
It would be,
D, very good, exactly. Atypical? A, good. Anarchy? E, good. Atheist?
B.
Good. And then anecdote?
C.
C, good job. All right, excellent. Okay, moving on. So let's go on to what I had you do for homework, and except, didn't quite get there, but that's okay. So do you remember what the root ped or pedos means?
Foot.
Foot. No. That's what the prefix by means.
Oh.
So ped means foot. So we had the words like pedal, pedestrian, pedestal, those types of words. Then we had biped. Now biped, that's where you got the two from, because bi means two, of course. So let's do a little bit of review and see how much you can remember. Let's see. Let's do... I'm not sure how you'll do on this one. We'll try it at least. Okay. So do you remember the root for for year? If something happens once a year, how often does it happen?
Bicentennial. Centennial.
Right, but so the bi means two, the cent means 100, so 200, and then what is the part of that word that means year? Ennial. So N or an means year. So if something happens once a year, it happens annual. Every annual or every year, basically. So a yearbook can sometimes be called an annual because it comes out once a year. Now, a yearly sum, you might not know this, annuity. What do you think if it happens every 2 years? What would be that word?
Biannual.
Right. Biannual. Good. Excellent. And then let's do a few more and see how you do here. So every 4 years, what do you think that word is?
Quadannual.
You're close. Quadrennial. Every half year? I'll make it a little bigger so it's easier to see. Every half year? That is semi-annual.
Oh, okay.
So biannual means every 2 years. Every half year is semi-annual. Now, the confusing thing about bi is sometimes it can mean 2 times in one, and then sometimes it can mean every 2. Like, for example, bi-monthly can either mean twice a month or every 2 months. It gets really confusing. So twice a year literally means biannual, which is also confusing because biannual also means every 2 years. Through the years, now, let's say you have, an elderly relative who passes away and leaves you money. Now, one way that they are allowed to pay you that money is what is called perennially. Perennially basically means that that money will continue basically through the rest of your life because they're giving it to you in such small amounts. Basically, they're only giving you the interest that that money is earning and not the actual money itself. And so that is one option of giving it to you through the years, perennially. So by the year, you should know this one.
Annual.
Annual or annually. Good. One of three from a single birth.
Triplet.
Triplet, good. 3 angles.
Triangle.
Yeah, I was going to say, you should get that one, no problem. 3 wheels.
Tricycle.
Yeah, good. 3 focuses.
Trifocal.
So trifocal lenses, you've heard of bifocal. Trifocal lenses are pretty crazy. My dad has them. Basically, if you think of glasses, here's the lens of the glass. Bifocals, what they have is at the bottom here, they have an extra strength lens so that when they look down through the glasses, the magnifying part of it is stronger here so that when they look down at a piece of paper or a computer screen, they can see it closer. And then this is for far away vision. Trifocals are pretty nuts because they have strong vision down here. Now, some of them have even stronger. So they'll have like 3 layers. So it's strong here and then even stronger down there. Some of them, like my dad, have really strong also up here so that when they look up at things, they can also read it. So they're pretty intense glasses. And if you ever put on glasses of someone who has trifocals, you'll feel like you're just woke up because you'll feel all dizzy and it's hard to focus on it because it's just not how people are meant to see. 2 feet would be what? Biped. 4 feet. Quadruped, good. And then 2 pointed tooth. Bicuspid. Yeah, bicuspid. Good. All right, excellent. The rest of them, let's just do a quick oral review here. So bi means 2. Simi means half. A noose, like an annual. Year. Quadra.
4.
Per.
1.
Actually, in this case, it means, this is one that I don't think I taught you, so I'll just write it down. This one means through. So perennial means through the years. Tri.
3.
Kyklos.
Cycle.
Or what does cycle mean?
Wheel.
Wheel, very good. And then N, like biennial?
Year? No.
Yes, yeah, year. N and both mean year. Exactly. Good. Okay, a couple more. Ped means
Feet.
feet, and then phone. Sound. Excellent. All right, let's quickly fly through the rest of these. We'll just go really fast. So Latin centum means 100. So a century is 100 years. And then 1 cent is 1/100th of a dollar. That's why we call them cents. A centimeter is 100th of a meter. 10% means 10 out of every 100, basically. Yeah, so that's why it's called percent. Probably not something that you think about all the time, like where the word percent comes, but it actually makes sense. So through every 100, it would be 1 through every 100, or 10 through every 100. A centennial is every 100 years you celebrate that. Let's see. Let's continue on through here. I'm going fast on purpose. Oh, here we go. This is a good one. So 100 years would be called a what?
Century.
True, century. So the 100th year anniversary would be?
Centennial.
And do you see the year part of it here? The N, good. And then the 200th anniversary. Bicentennial, good.
And then bicentennial.
And then tricentennial, exactly. Good, excellent. Let's see. Oh, okay. And then we have, excuse me. So a semi-centennial would be which anniversary?
Half.
Or
45.
how much?
45.
45. 50th.
Well, it's like half 100 years, right?
Right, which would be 50. Half of 100 is 50. Maybe we need to have a math class after this. Just kidding. Okay. Actually, here's another kind of confusing one. The prefix sesqui, S-E-S-Q-U-I, means 1.5. So a sesquicentennial represents 1.5 or 150 years, basically. So a sesquicentennial is the 150th anniversary, which people celebrate. What was it? There was a company that just had its sesquicentennial anniversary, and I don't remember what it was. It wasn't Coca-Cola, but it was something like that just had their 150th anniversary, which is pretty crazy. Maybe. So let's just go super quick through this. We'll just do it out loud. So 100 years would be what? Century. 100th anniversary.
Centennial.
200th anniversary.
Bicentennial.
Good. 300th.
Tricentennial.
50th.
Semicentennial.
150th. Not semi. I'll go back up. Yeah?
Sesquicentennial.
Sesquicentennial, good. Every 2 years?
Biannual.
Yep, every 3 years?
Triannual.
Every 4 years? Quadrennial, right? And then every half year? Semi-annual. Good. Excellent. All right. Very good. So I think these are pretty much review. So let's go down to this one. So Latin milla means 1,000. So a million is 1,000 thousands. A mil is a thousandth part of a dollar. A millimeter is a thousandth part of a meter. So millennium combines milla plus n, so it literally means 1,000 years. So millennium is a period of 1,000 years. Now, what year were you born in?
2003.
Oh, okay. So you don't remember the millennium. So when the millennium happened, when it hit year 2000, it was a huge deal because that hadn't happened in 1,000 years, of course. So it was a really, really big deal. There were massive parties everywhere. It was the biggest thing to happen all over the world, pretty much, because it was a millennium. It was a big deal. So the period of the 1,000 years during which, according to the New Testament, Christ will rule on earth is also called the millennium. Let's see. So centum is what? Number 20 here.
Million.
No, centum is 100, like century. And then milla is?
Million.
A million, right? No, I'm sorry, 1,000. And then a ped is? 2. No. Ped is? Feet. Right. So a worm-like creature that supposedly has 100 feet is a centipede. It doesn't actually have that many feet, by the way. There's also something that has called a millipede, which actually only has 2 pairs of legs on each body segment. And so this worm appears to have 1,000 feet, but truly it doesn't have that many. So a centipede actually has twice as many legs as a millipede. A speedometer measures vehicle speed. A tachometer measures the revolutions per minute of an engine. An odometer measures the miles a car has been driven. And a pedometer measures distance covered on where? Feet. Good. So a woman wishing to learn how far she walks every day will put on what? A pedometer. Yeah. So the ending meter in speedometer, etc., comes from metron, which means to measure. So an optometrist does what? What do they do to your vision?
They
They measure it, right. So they measure how good it is or how bad it is. A thermometer measures heat, and a chronometer measures time. So a chronometer is an extremely accurate clock which is used on ships to determine longitude. It's good to have a chronometer existing somewhere on a ship so that you don't lose time, which is really easy to do when you're out on the open sea. So metron means what?
Metron is measure.
Measure, good. Opticos as in optometrist means?
Measure.
No, that's what metron means. So what does an optometrist measure?
Eye.
Vision, right, vision. Good. And then therma, as in thermometer, measures what? Heat, good. And then chronos, as in chronometer, means?
Clock.
Clock measures what? Time, exactly, good. So opticos means vision. So an optician sells things that relate to vision, like eyeglasses, binoculars, etc. And then therma has to do with heat. The thermostat regulates heat or temperature. A lot of families have a thermostat in their house which keeps it not too hot, not too cold. Then we have chronos, which means what? No. You're correct. Time. So think about Greek mythology. There's the character of Kronos. It has to do with time, or Roman mythology rather. So time. Can you think of any other words that include chron in them, meaning time? What's the word that means in order or in time order?
Chronological.
Chronological, very good. There's also a chronicle. A chronicle is a description of what's happened over time. It's a story told over time. And then chronic, a chronic invalid is sick most of the time or time after time. There are illnesses that, come and go, like you have the flu, but the flu is not a chronic illness. Chronic illness would be something that really doesn't ever go away completely. It's someone who's almost constantly sick. And a chronic liar lies almost all the time. So we talked about pedestrian. Let's see. But pedestrian has two meanings. Now, this is important to learn for the SAT. I know the SAT seems like a distant thing in the future, as it should be, but this is one of those words that comes up on the SAT that a lot of people miss because they know the main meaning of pedestrian, which is someone who travels on foot. However, pedestrian can also mean it can be an adjective that describes kind of an awkward language or way of thinking, or just something that's very basic and not advanced. So a pedestrian person speaks in very labored, tedious, dull. They have a lot of cliches that they're saying. There's really no originality. They could be described as pedestrian. And of course, it comes from the same root. It basically is something that's comparatively slow. It's wearisome. It's not really imaginative. A pedestrian is not someone who's seeing the world at a fast pace or anything like that. And so that's where the word originally came from. So if you call someone pedestrian, you're implying that they don't have any fresh thoughts, that everything that they're thinking has already been thought before. If you call a writer pedestrian, you're basically saying that they are, graceless, their writing is very heavy, hackneyed. The word hackneyed means cliche. It's been used over and over again, very trite. So, can you think of any movie that you've seen recently that you would describe as being very pedestrian? In other words, not original, something that has been done many times before?
No.
No? Okay, that's good. Maybe you watch good movies then. So there's a lot of movies that just kind of reuse plots of other movies and they just slap a new title on it and call it a day. So that would be a pedestrian type of movie. All right, good. Let's review some of these words that we just learned. So what would be a political philosophy that kind of it rehashes old ideas rather than create something new? What would that be called?
We just talked about it.
Uh-huh. It's the word that has two meanings?
Pedestrian.
Right, yeah, pedestrian. Yeah, so something that it could either be referring to a person who's on foot, or it could be referring to something that is used too much, kind of cliche, that type of thing. So we'll skip some of these because I think you're pretty good with most of these words. Do you remember what the word perennial means?
Time.
Has to do with N, which means... No, that would be millennial or millennium. So N, do you remember what this root means? N or an?
Year.
Year. And then do you remember what the prefix per means?
Thousand.
No, that's mil. Per means, remember I gave the example of
One.
if you... What's that?
1.
No. So the example that I gave of if a relative passes away and they pay you... Yeah, there you go. So it would mean 3. I'm sorry, through, not 3. Through. So through the years is what perennial means. There are plants that bloom perennially, which means they bloom throughout the years. Then there's centipede, which literally means what? What does centipede literally mean?
1,000.
1,000?
No, 100.
Yeah, there you go. 100, and then it combines it with the root ped, which means foot. So literally 100 foot, which of course is a great exaggeration for how many legs they actually have. Let's see. We talked about a tricycle, of course. Now, if you remember what uni means, like in universe or unilateral, I think you said the right answer. It means one or single. So unilateral is just one side. Let's see. Therma. Do you remember what therma means?
Measure.
Well, that's what metron means, but therma means heat. Good. All right, good. And then sesquicentennial. Sesqua means
150.
1.5, right. In this case, it's 150 years because it's a sesquicentennial. So it means 1.5 times 100. Good. All right, good. Quick review here. So a thousandth of a dollar would be a...
Cent.
Yeah, well, actually, that would be a hundredth of a dollar. What would be the thousand? Actually, this one I have to look back on. I actually don't remember what this one is called. I'm not sure what this... Oh, wait, let's see. Oh, a mil apparently is a thousandth of a dollar. We don't use mils anymore. I mean, not to measure dollars, certainly. 1,000 years would be...
Millennia.
Millennium, right. 100 feet. What? No. What's 100? The prefix that means 100. Yeah. So centa. And then what's the root for feet? Centipede, right. Good. And then 1,000 feet would be?
Millipede.
Good. 2 feet?
5 head.
Right. 4 feet?
Quadruped.
Every 2 years?
Biannual.
Biannual. Every 4 years?
Quadrennial.
Good. Measures distance on foot? What is the root? What is the word that means measure?
Metron.
Metron. So what would be something that measures distance on foot?
Clock.
No, that's a clock measures time, not distance. Pedometer.
Oh.
That one was pretty easy. A person who gets around on foot.
Pedestrian.
Pedestrian, good. Labored, tedious, or dull. Oops.
Pedestrian.
Also pedestrian, good. Through the years?
Perennial.
Perennial. The 100th anniversary?
Centennial.
Good. Measures vision? A person who measures vision is a optometrist. Good. Measures time? No. Time. What's the root for time?
Close.
You're close. Chron, C-H-R-O-N. So something that measures time would be? No. There's no opta. There's nothing about vision here. And then what's the root for measure? Right. So it would be a chronometer. There you go. Measures heat.
Thermometer.
Right. And literally it's a thermometer. Now, of course, we say thermometer, but the actual word is from thermo plus meter. So, someone who sells optical goods or for your eyes?
Optometrist.
Good. And then time and time again, something that happens all the time. So what's the root for time?
Chronological.
In this case, it would just be chronic, right?
Okay.
The 300th anniversary of something?
Bicentennial.
And then the 150th anniversary?
No.
Yeah, no. You're really close. It's sesquicentennial. Sesquicentennial, right. Good job. Very good. Very good. Okay, so I think you basically have these down. Okay, let's finish this up really quick. This is the Ambrose Bierce one. So we talked about a little bit about what each of these words mean, and we'll continue talking about it a little bit more. So if you'll notice, let's see. Did we get to the second paragraph? I don't remember if we did. Did we finish this paragraph here?
I don't think so.
I don't think we did either. Okay, so let's talk about this paragraph. So remember, this whole thing is written by Ambrose Bierce, and he's writing it in a response to a book that came out, and the book is called Forensic Eloquence. Now, if you remember, Ambrose Bierce does not like this book, Forensic Eloquence. Now, we haven't exactly figured out why up to this point, but he explains why in this paragraph. And he explains what the book is about and why he doesn't like it. So I want to go through, and I'm just going to read this all the way through. And as I go, I want you to try to pay attention. And there's a lot of big words. There's a lot of complex sentences. So it's going to seem really overwhelming. But I want you to try to pay attention and try to figure out, okay, what is... We did do this one. Oh, okay. So do you remember what this book was about, the Forensic Eloquence? Kind of in your own words, yeah.
Teaching people to talk about nothing.
Yeah, exactly. So he defines it here. He says forensic eloquence is the art of saying things in such a way as to make them pass for more than they are worth. In other words, it kind of is, it's a lot of, hot air, but no real substance, basically. Yeah, very good, very good. And then if you look at this paragraph, we'll skip the next one, but let's look at this one here. He says, for eloquence per se, now eloquence, if you remember, means speaking well. He says, eloquence per se, considered merely as an art of pleasing, I entertain something of the respect evoked by success, for it always pleases at least the speaker. It is to speech what an ornate style is to writing. Good and pleasant enough in its time and place, and, like pie crust and the evening girl, destitute of any basis in common sense. So, let's talk about what he's saying here. He's saying eloquence, per se, considered merely as an art of pleasing, I entertain something of the respect evoked by success. So, here he's saying the benefits of eloquence are what? What is the benefit of eloquence, does he say?
Respect, some success.
Yeah, it has some success, right? Some success, rather. So not a whole lot, but he does admit that, hey, there's some good things about it. and therefore it deserves some kind of success, some kind of respect. Now, he says, if nothing else, it's successful if only in the fact that it pleases at least the speaker. So at least the one who's speaking is happy about what he's saying. Now, what do you think per se means here? For eloquence, per se. What's that?
For se.
Yeah, basically. Well, what do you mean by say? How would you spell that? Are you saying like for say or for say?
The second one.
The second one? Okay. Well, sort of. He's saying in other words, basically. So he's saying eloquence, in other words. He says you have to give some success because at least it pleases the speaker. And then he does, after that, he makes a comparison. In the sentence after the one we just read, what is the comparison that he's making here? He says, it is to speech what an ornate style is to writing. So what two things is he comparing?
Speech and writing.
He's comparing speech and writing, and he's comparing what about speech? So what about speech, and then what about writing? So
ornate.
What is ornate? So if you look at the first part, he's saying that it is to speech. What is the it referring to here?
Eloquence.
Yeah. So he's comparing so he's saying eloquence is to speech as what is to writing?
Ornate.
Ornate what?
Ornate style.
Ornate style, yeah. So he's saying eloquence is the same thing as an ornate style in writing. So how does he say that they are the same? Basically, that they're good and pleasant enough in time and place. And then he compares it to pie crust and the evening girl. In other words, a girl you just take on a date and then don't call again. They're basically destitute of any basis in common sense. So what do you think destitute means?
I don't know.
So do they have common sense or do they not have common sense?
No.
Okay, so what do you think destitute means then?
No common sense?
Yeah, so destitute would mean lacking or not having common sense in this case. So you can be destitute as far as money goes. If you are destitute, it means you don't have money. And so that's what he means. It's destitute of common sense. There's no common sense. So he's comparing eloquence in speech to an ornate style in writing. Now he's saying both of them are good and pleasant in their time, but they lack really any common sense. What do you think he means by that?
No sense in doing it.
Sort of, and also there's no real substance to it. Like, it sounds nice at the time, but if you really look hard into it, it lacks common sense. It doesn't really have a function or a purpose. So what do you think ornate means? At this point, we should have enough information to tell.
Like nice style.
Okay, now, can you think of a maybe stronger adjective than nice?
Pleasing.
You're close. Basically a complex or decorated style. So think of if you say that someone's house is decorated ornately, what you're saying is it's very over decorated. So there's tons of, gold and flashy flowers and things like that. And so that's what kind of writing style he's talking about. He's saying, don't do that because, yeah, maybe it may sound good and pleasant at the time, but eventually you come to realize that it's destitute of any common sense. Then he goes on and he says, forensic eloquence, on the contrary, has an all too sufficient foundation in reason and the order of things. So what do you think sufficient? If this is destitute, if an ornate style and eloquence is destitute of any basis in common sense, in other words, there's no reason for it, and then he says, on the contrary, forensic eloquence, it has sufficient foundation in reason. What do you think sufficient means? Yeah, exactly. So the reason we know that, even if you didn't know what the word sufficient meant, you could easily tell it because it's comparing it with destitute. This is destitute of common sense. This has sufficient that has sufficient foundation in common sense, basically. So notice the sarcasm that he's about to go with. So he's saying, whoa, that was weird. Okay. He's saying here that all of this is, why we shouldn't allow overly complex sentence structures, things like that. But then he says that, hey, but at least forensic eloquence, that he's been criticizing this whole time, has at least a sufficient foundation and reason. He says, and then he explains why. Because it promotes the ambition of tricksters and it advances the fortunes of rogues. For I take it that the Ciceros, the Mirabeaus, the Burkes, the O'Connells, and the Patrick Henrys, and the rest of them, pets of the textbookers and scourges of youth, belong in either the one category or the other, or in both. So he's basically saying, well, at least there's a purpose for forensic eloquence. And what is that purpose? Or what is that reason why people use it?
Promotes ambition of tricksters.
Yeah. So it basically it allows people to fool other people, or it allows speakers to be able to fool and kind of trick people. So what do you think rogues mean? What would be a rogue, and how do we know? There's a word. What's that?
Crazy.
Well, there's a word in this sentence that helps us understand at least what kind of word it is. What's another word that means a similar thing to rogue?
Destitute?
No, in this sentence, in the sentence we just read.
Tricksters.
Yeah, tricksters. So we know it has something to do with tricksters. So even if you didn't know exactly what rogues meant, you could at least get the idea that it means basically the same thing as tricksters. That's why I'm teaching you how to figure out words in context, not because I really care whether or not you know what these words mean. I just want to see how you do being able to figure it on your own. So like this one, for example, it's okay that you don't know what a rogue is, but it's not okay if you don't know how to figure it out based off of the context. So in this one, it's fairly easy because we have a synonym. All right, so I think that's all we'll get to today. So what I'll have you do is go ahead and finish reading this for homework. And so this one, there's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So there's only 10 words left to define. And again, don't look them up in a dictionary because it's not necessarily correct. I want you to look at what they mean in the context of the passage. And I specifically chose... Go ahead, yeah.
How do I get to this?
Oh, guys, I sent it to you last week, but I'll send it to you again right after I hang up with you. Yeah, so this is just, all this is a PDF file. So this whole thing it's fairly long. So I'll just send you the whole thing. And then next week we're starting a new one, so I'll send that to you as well. And then, yeah, all you have to do is open it and go, in this case, it's on the last 2 pages of the PDF. And like I said last week, you're welcome to either email me the homework if you want to just write it down on a separate on like a document and send it to me, that's fine. Or you can give it to me in class on Thursday, that's fine too. Whatever way you want to do that is completely fine. So yeah.
My homework this week is just to read that
yeah.
paper.
Read the paper and define the words based off of the context. Again, don't look up the words in the dictionary because they'll probably be wrong. Mostly because the words are used in an unusual way. And so the way I want you to do it is to look up or to figure out what the words mean based off of the context. And if you remember, I mentioned this last week, but I'll tell you it again. So the 3 ways to figure out what a word means in context. The first way is, I think I told you this. If not, I should have. So the 3 ways of learning what a word means in context. Let me make that a little bigger so you can see it. So you can either judge it by a synonym or antonym. And sometimes it has a synonym or antonym, and sometimes it doesn't. If it doesn't have a synonym or antonym in the sentence, then try to look to see if there's any examples of the meaning of the word given. If there are no examples, then unfortunately you have to do what the hardest one is, which is the general tone of what the word is. In other words, is it neutral, negative, or positive? And even if you can't tell exactly what the word means, you should be able to at least tell whether it's neutral, negative, or positive. So I'll give you an example of how to use it as a synonym. If I said, our neighbor was a cantankerous old man, his grumpy nature caused the kids to stay away from him. In this case, if you were trying to define what cantankerous meant, what synonym in the sentence will help you out?
Grumpy.
Grumpy, yeah, exactly. So this one's easy. When it has a synonym or antonym, it makes it really easy. Now, an example is probably the second toughest. So if you said something like, our neighbor, and then if you had the same sentence, and then you said, he is always yelling at the little kids. Now, this gives you an example of what cantankerous means, and so you know that the fact that he's always yelling at little kids lets you know what cantankerous means. Now, the general tone is a little bit harder, so this would be like if you said, our neighbor, blah, 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 cantankerous man, and we didn't like him. Now, in this case, you have no idea what cantankerous means. It could mean that he smells bad. I mean, it could mean anything, but you at least know that it's something negative, right? Because the fact that we didn't like him. So if you come across a general tone word, you won't be able to tell exactly what the word means, but you'll at least be able to tell the general idea of what the word is going for, even if you can't exactly pin down the meaning. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so what I'll have you do is finish reading the Ambrose Bierce passage, and I'll write this in the email also so that it's easy for you to see what your homework is, and then I'll resend the PDF to you so that you can easily see what it is. And then next week we'll start a new document. Yeah.
Can you send the PDF to my Gmail?
To your Gmail? Sure, no problem. Because I think I sent it to your dad or your mom before, which is probably why you weren't able to see it.
Okay.
So I'll go ahead and send it to you just to make sure. So I'll do that right now as soon as I hang up, and it should be okay. All right, any questions or anything?